I want to talk about super long films because I trailed that in the intro of the last episode and I didn't actually get to it because I talked about the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, right? And I was going to go on to talk about how long that film is. I think it's 2 hours 20 to 2 hours 30-ish, right? So it's long, but it made me think, oh, remember a time when I thought that that was super long, like a 2 hour 30 film. When it came out, 2007, up and coming movie nerd, was like, bloody hell, that's a long one. Like, wow, it's almost brought with it a level of prestige to be a long film. Now, a 2 hour 30 to 3 hour film is common, and not just in art, in arty movies. I would consider Assassination of Jesse James like an artful movie. But in auteur movies as well, so like Chris Nolan with Oppenheimer, Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like these are all long, like big directors making artful movies that are also long. And then, but also commercial movies, right? So like Endgame, Mission Impossible, Wicked, like these are all like 3 hour movies. Giant budgets, commercial, mainstream, often hits, right? But that just hit me as like, oh, we've kind of been like continually coaxed into this comfort zone of like an over 2 hour movie is certainly the norm, and an over 2 hour 30 movie is apparently acceptable. And not only acceptable, but bankable, or that's something almost preferable by the studios, which then got me thinking more, right? Why is it that the industry is so focused on like financial efficiency? So like, how can we make sure that this movie is bankable? How can we make sure we make our money back? The movie industry's failing, the studio system, the cinema system, these infrastructures of the economy of cinema, that they're failing, and how can we make sure that we remain solvent, right? That's the whole vibe of like, a couple of years ago we were talking about, in the aftermath of COVID, or even before COVID, we were talking about, are movies dead? Is this industry going to be able to financially survive, right? So hear me out. Why is it then that over 2 hour 30 movies are not only very common, but in some cases the norm, and for the most expensive movies? So you think about the Mission movie, right? And how much that cost. I know that it cost so much because it was filmed through COVID and they had to reshoot and things like that. But let's just okay, we can use a different example. Let's use Wicked, right? Or Endgame, right? Any of those examples. By making the movie 3 hours, you by definition make the movie more expensive to make. And that's not a small fish. That's not a small fish, small fry thing, right? That's, when producers cost up the budget, they're almost literally doing this page by page by page. It's almost like you can be like, okay, per page, we're spending like 10 million, 5 million, that kind of thing, right? I'm just pulling figures out my arse here, but I'm saying that time costs money, right? Because for every new page, you might need more props, locations, reshoots, staff, production costs, crew, and all these things. And so, by definition, making a film longer makes it more expensive to make. So when you're talking about a Mission Final Reckoning that costs 400 million to make, again, put out of your mind the COVID obstacles, maybe that was a 3 hour movie. Maybe a 2 hour Final Reckoning movie might have cost, I don't know, 350 million conservatively, or 300 million, right? So then the studio's saving money, and it's more likely that film's going to make its money back at the box office. Because we all know, for some reason, this is now in the public consciousness that like a movie has to make double its budget in order to make its money back, because you have to account for like marketing and whatnot, which for some reason isn't quoted in the budget. So by removing 50 million off the budget, you might actually remove 100 million off the target box office. So why is it that it feels like it's the norm? Because the movie industry is apparently teetering on the edge. It's apparently going to go bust. Why would studios not? Why are studios so willing to cut out the mid-budget movies, like we're only going to make the tentpole movies that are going to make us money, or tiny weeny Blumhouse productions that are going to make us shitloads of money, right? So they cut out the mid-budget ones. They're now on telly. Why is it then, if they're so cutthroat about that, and they're so cutthroat about residuals and how can we pay you after the fact once we know how much it makes at the box office, things like this, why would they not be cutthroat about runtime? Isn't that amazing? Isn't that fucking weird? Like, isn't that weird that the whole film industry is kind of based off this tradition of like the producers sat behind the editor with a big stick being like, oh, cut this, cut that, and cut this, and you have to send your movie off for, if you're working with a studio, some studios are really harsh about what you should cut and this and that. We've all heard these stories, right? Directors having director's cuts in order to get what they actually wanted into people's homes. Where the fuck has that gone? Where the fuck has the culture gone of studios actually putting their foot down and cutting the time down? Which makes me think it can't be on their remit of notes and edits to make. But why? Why aren't studios going to directors and saying, yeah, this is a great script, but it's fucking 180 pages. Get it down to 120 and we'll save about 100 million worth of budget. Which, yes, is a cynical reason to cut down a movie's runtime. But let me tell you this. I'm done with this whole auto vision approach. Sometimes a director has earned the right to have an auto vision. Okay, so Chris Nolan absolutely has earned the right. He made $1 billion with a 3-hour movie and it won Best Picture, and he earned that off the back of other massive successes, right? Greta Gerwig has earned the right to have an auto vision. Not that she has done a super long film. She knows better than that, but you know, she's worked way up through fucking I was going to say Loose Women, through Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie. She's earned the right to have a say on what film she wants to make and how she wants to make it, right? And there's so many other examples. But then there are other people who haven't necessarily earned that. So Ari Aster coming out with Eddington is a 3-hour film. And then this brings me on to the other point. The reason why I'm done with with this culture is after hearing the interviews with Chris McQuarrie about the process of quote unquote writing the final reckoning in Mission Impossible. I've now watched so many interviews with Chris McQuarrie. I've consumed so much content about him. He's quite readily and openly saying, yeah, we didn't have the script on set a lot of the time. We shot the action without knowing where. Like, they literally shot the scene of Tom running across the bridge in London without knowing where he was running to. Just let that sink in. What? That you're filming a mission movie that is costing hundreds of millions and the studio is complicit in letting you do that without a script, to the point where you're boasting about it on every fucking podcast you find yourself on. What the fuck is going on? What the fuck has happened to studios putting their foot down? It confuses me so much. And that brings me on to another point. Not only will it save budget to make tighter movies, not only does it get more eyes on the prize creatively and hopefully tightens up people like Aster and McQuarrie and Tarantino who can get a bit too big for their boots, but it might actually make more money at the box office for repeated viewing, right? We all know some of the biggest movies ever made at the box office, financially at the box office, have been the longest ones, right? Titanic, Endgame, Avatar, these are long movies. So I'm not here saying that long movies don't make money. I'm here saying that those are the exceptions and not the rule. The length did not make them good, right? They suited their length because they were good movies and they were paced correctly. But long movies does not make us good movies, right? If you think about Final Reckoning and how much they wish that had made at the box office, I don't have the figure to hand, but I know that it didn't quite do the business they wanted it to do. Would I, let's just speak about me personally, have been more likely to go see Final Reckoning again and experience those stunts again, despite the other flaws, if it was a 2-hour movie and not a 3-hour movie? 100 fucking percent. I even thought about it, and then I was like, I don't want to go back to a 3-hour movie, right? Sinners had a massive repeat business. People going back to see it again. That was 2 hours, 20, 30-ish, right? So it was just on that cusp of like, okay, I think I can stomach this for another viewing because I really, really enjoyed it. If movies come out at 2 hours long and are loved, and I think probably more likely to be loved if you're tightening up a fucking script that you've actually fucking written, Chris McQuarrie, you'll make more money by default as well because there'll be more repeat viewing, surely. Not only have you saved money on the budget and blah, blah, blah. And that's my final note is shortening the movie can often actually make the movie better most of the time. There are so many movies that could have done with a bit of tightening up. And it's almost like we have too much free reign on directors nowadays. And that seems to have been frittered away so quickly without anyone really noticing it or mentioning it. So The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford came out in 2007 and was considered a super long movie. And now it's fucking absolutely not. And I just wish that we could go back, not only creatively, for creative benefits, but for financial benefits. These studios can cynically make more profit by maybe making better films that are shorter. Fucking hell. So, anyway,